Hello friends and welcome to a new episode of The Post-Apocalyptic Inventor. In this episode I'll show you how I built a cube-shaped ceiling lamp that is heavily influenced by the design of Borg cubes, which, in case you don't know them, are alien spaceships well known from one of my all-time favorite TV shows, Star Trek: The Next Generation. So let's just get right into it then. The idea for this project, like so many other of my projects, started with the determination to turn something useless into something awesome. And I had made the observation that spray-painted scrap PCBs could be used to create cool-looking spaceship surfaces with intricate details. And while PCBs in bulk can have a certain scrap value, and while some of them can be used to salvage useful parts, a loose collection of just a few broken boards is hardly worth anything, and that's why I will use a random assortment of boards from my trash bin for this build. But while they will make for interesting surface features, they are not really suited to comprise the actual structure of the lamp or to hold the tons of LEDs that I will install. Instead, I will build the lamp's enclosure from 1.5mm strong aluminium sheets that I bought online. These sheets are 50 centimeters wide, and that is why it shows something just below half that for the dimensions of the cube's surface. The cube will measure 24 by 24 by 24 cubic centimeters. And like many times before, after taking measurements, an angle grinder is used to cut the sheets. And in case you're a regular follower of this channel, you will recognize that this project didn't start in my own workshop, but back at my parents' property, which I visited a few weeks ago. In a next step, I used these 1.8mm drill bits to drill around 50 holes in a random pattern into the sheet. Why 1.8mm? Well, that's because I will insert LEDs with 1.8mm diameter here. So why such an odd number then? Well, that's just because I was looking for any tiny green LED for a low price, and I found 1.8mm LEDs for the price of 35 cents for 10 diodes. So I ordered 300 of them for a little more than 10 euros for this project. But you could also use 1mm or 2mm LEDs or anything in between, it doesn't really matter. After drilling the holes, the edges have to be cleaned, and since I'm not very well equipped over at my father's shop, I just used a much larger drill bit and did it by hand. And I also decided to drill a number of 4mm holes close to the edges of all of the sheets, and this is where the parts will be riveted or bolted together later. Now our first 24 by 24 sheet and an assortment of PCBs are prepared to be spray painted. First, a layer of black paint is applied. And immediately after that, I apply a silverish spray called rally spray in these parts, which is normally used for car rims. I just use a tiny little bit of it and from a fair distance. Doing this right after using the black paint leads to an effect where the silverish particles collect at the edges of the components, forming interesting patterns and giving the board a metallic look. After letting the paint dry for a few days, I can now turn the sheet around and start inserting the 1.8mm LEDs, and I orient them so that all anodes point in one direction and all the cathodes point in the opposite one. This will make soldering much easier later on. Most of the LEDs have to be pushed into the holes by force, actually holding them fairly well in place without any glue, but others don't, and that's why I apply MS polymer adhesive behind all of the diodes in order to make sure they won't fall out. And again, the sheet is left to dry for a few days. After that, I soldered all the cathodes together, forming a common cathode or ground. And then I soldered a 470 ohms quarter-watt resistor in series with each and every single diode. And after that, the open ends of all these resistors are also connected together to form a common plus pole, where now plus 12 volts DC can be used to supply the diodes. But this was actually just the first of the 6 surfaces of that cube that needed to be individually made. And for the next 4 sheets, I did things a little differently. I took some of the previously painted PCBs and made a plan which ones to use and where to fasten them on the boards later on. I wanted to install tons of LEDs and it wouldn't make any sense to drill holes that would later just be covered by the boards. So I drew the outlines onto the surfaces and then proceeded to drill 50 or so holes all around those outlines. Again, the edges were removed from the holes and everything was spray painted using the same technique as before. Then, in painstaking work, the remaining 200 or so LEDs were glued to the sheets, left to dry, and just like before, the cathodes were connected and protection resistors soldered to each and every diode's anode. With all that done, it was time to start connecting the 5 existing surfaces. And I did that using standard aluminium angle pieces. These are aluminium extrusions that can be bought in a variety of sizes for just a few bucks in almost any hardware store here in Germany. But I do hear that they might be harder to get in other countries. These are 15mm pieces and they are so soft and thin that you can actually cut them with a good side cutter. And they too get 4mm holes, just like the sheets before them. And I was actually planning to use rivets for anything but the top cover, but I ran out of the right size of rivets early on and was forced to use M4 nuts and bolts instead, of which I have luckily thousands lying around. And using this method I was able to connect 4 of the surfaces together quite easily, almost forming a complete cube already. The 5th surface that I already prepared will be the top cover, and that's why it will be installed last. Before that, something else has to happen though. Remember me saying that this is not supposed to be a Borg cube model, but a ceiling lamp stylized like a Borg cube? Well, and that's why we still have to take care of the actual lamp part. This is a car headlight from the 1970s or 80s. To my knowledge, belonging to an old Opel Kadett. I bought this at a flea market for just a few euros and I think it will fit this idea perfectly. I start by actually cleaning the headlight and checking the ancient light bulb inside. It's a 12-volt light bulb with 2 filaments rated for 40 and 45 watts. I should be able to power this from the same power supply I'll use for the LEDs. So now a remaining part of that aluminium sheet is needed. The measurements for another 24 by 24 sheet are taken and the location of the center is determined. A steel compass is then used to draw a circle. Then I drill 4 8mm holes. And now I have fastened the sheet to the workbench, supporting it with additional metal sheets where possible, so it won't bend over so easily. And now I use the pre-drilled holes to cut a large circle into the metal using my old jigsaw that I repaired in a video some years ago. After filing off the edges, the headlight fits well into the hole. Now the sheet is being cut once more with the angle grinder. And now the headlight is glued to the metal, again using MS polymer adhesive. And after a day or two, I turn the light around and prepare it to be spray painted as well. In order to shield the glass from the spray, I used a cutout piece of aluminium and some electrician's tape because I have nothing else at hand. And after a few days of drying, the final surface is now almost finished as well. Almost, that is, because it still lacks a bunch of holes to be connected to the cube. Should I have done this before painting, but forgot it. But in the end, it didn't matter. After finishing this part, I could feel that the project would be completed soon and I got really excited. But a few things still had to be done. All the common cathodes of the 5 LED panels had to be connected together, and I also soldered them directly to one of the pins of the headlight lamp to form a common ground for the entire lamp. Then I used a 3-wired cable for 1 common minus pole and 2 12-volt lines to switch the light bulb and LEDs on and off independently. The wire would also carry the weight of the lamp, and that's why it needs to be fastened to the top cover without physically pulling on the LEDs or the lamp. Of course, also a hole had to be drilled. The 4 top angle pieces had M4 threads cut into them so that the top cover can be removed at a later time to replace the bulb or for revisions or upgrades of the lamp. And now I could turn it on in the shop for the first time, and that felt really good. In the last step, the PCBs were glued to the surfaces. Overnight, tape was used to hold the boards in place. And after that, I have now temporarily installed the lamp in a clubhouse over a bar counter that I have built with a group of friends over the last couple of weeks. And maybe it can stay there on public display at some point. So guys, I really hope that you liked this little project, and if so, then please give this video a like because I really need the feedback. And if you have any other ideas how we could make everyday things look like stuff from our favorite movie franchises, may it be Star Trek or anything else, then please post your ideas in the comment section because I sure would like to do more of that kind of stuff in the future. And if you really like this video and if you want to support me making more videos, then please consider visiting my Patreon under patreon.com/tpai and support this channel. See you soon, guys.